Captain Yuna pressed her pale hand against the cool crystal surface of the ship's main viewer and watched her world die. The beautiful blue-green planet below looked peaceful from this distance, but she knew better. Dark spots were spreading across the continents like a disease. Those spots were the enemy feeding grounds where nothing would ever grow again. The bridge of the Harmony's light shook as another explosion rocked the massive vessel. Yuna stumbled but kept her balance. Around her, the bridge crew worked at their stations with quiet desperation. The Kalari had always been a peaceful people. Their ships were built for beauty and exploration, not for war. The elegant curves and crystal spires that made their vessels look like floating art were now a weakness against an enemy that cared nothing for beauty. "Captain, the Western Defense Grid is gone," reported Lieutenant Borum from his position at the tactical station. His voice was steady, but Yuna could hear the fear underneath. Borum was young, even by Kalari standards barely 200 years old. He had never seen violence like this. None of them had. Yuna turned away from the viewer and looked at her crew. The bridge was dimly lit by the soft blue glow of their bioluminescent controls. In better times, this light was calming. Now it made everyone look like ghosts. "How many ships do we have left?" she asked. 17 vessels still responding to communications," answered Commander Heian from the communication station. "The Peaceful Dawn and Silver Current are heavily damaged but still fighting. Captain Jihan reports his engines are failing. 17 ships from a fleet that had numbered over 300 just days ago." Yuna closed her eyes and tried to push away the image of all those beautiful vessels being torn apart by the enemy's biomechanical horrors. The Vorthak ships looked like living nightmares made of metal and flesh. They moved like predators hunting prey, and that was exactly what they were. The Kalari had first encountered the Vorthak 3 weeks ago when the ancient enemy had emerged from the dark space beyond the galactic rim. Old records spoke of them in whispers, a species so old and cruel that even the eldest races feared to name them directly. They consumed everything: planets, atmospheres, entire star systems. They left nothing behind but empty space in the cold silence of death. "Captain, incoming transmission from the surface," called Heian. Her voice cracked slightly. "It's from the capital city." "Put it through," Yuna said, though she dreaded what she would hear. The voice that came through the speakers was barely recognizable as Kalari. It was filled with static and terror. "This is Governor Minji from New Harmony. The creatures are in the city. They're taking people to their processing centers. We can see the ships overhead. Please, someone help us. Our children are—" The transmission cut off with a burst of electronic noise. The bridge fell silent except for the distant sound of explosions and the steady hum of the ship's systems. Yuna felt something break inside her chest. New Harmony had been home to 50 million Kalari. Now it was just another feeding ground for the Vorthak. "Captain," said Tay from the science station, "I'm reading massive bioform activity across all major population centers. The enemy is not just destroying our cities, they're harvesting them." Yuna knew what that meant, though she wished she didn't. The Vorthak didn't simply kill their enemies, they processed them, turned living beings into nutrients for their bioships, made them part of the endless hunger that drove the ancient species across the galaxy. It was a fate worse than death because in a way the victims remained aware even as they were consumed. Another explosion shook the ship, and this time the lights flickered. "Damage report," Yuna called out. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported the damage control officer. Emergency force fields are holding, but we've lost 2 more weapon pods. Captain, we can't take much more of this." Yuna nodded grimly. The Harmony's light had been the pride of the Kalari fleet, a vessel designed for deep space exploration and first contact with new species. Its weapons were defensive, only small plasma arrays meant to clear space debris or defend against pirates. Against the Vorthak, they were useless. She walked to her command chair and sat down heavily. The chair was grown from living coral and shaped to perfectly fit her body. It had always been comfortable before. Now it felt like a throne made of bones. "Options," she said to her bridge crew. "We could try to break through their blockade," suggested Borum. "Make a run for the outer system and hope some of our people escape in the civilian transports." "Negative," replied Heian. "Long-range sensors. Show Vorthak bioships patrolling all major hyperspace routes. Nothing gets in or out without their permission. What about the emergency beacon network? Asked Tay. We could send a distress call to the Galactic Assembly, request immediate military assistance. Yuna almost laughed, but there was no humor left in her. The Assembly will debate our request for months while we die. Besides, what could they send? The Alteran hegemony has a dozen patrol ships. The Crystalline Confederacy has never built a warship in their entire history. None of the galactic civilizations are prepared for something like this. The bridge fell, quiet again. Outside the main viewer, a Vorthak bioship drifted past like a living asteroid. Its surface pulsed with veins of dark energy and weapon ports that looked like hungry mouths. As Yuna watched, it fired a beam of corrosive light at a Kalari transport trying to flee. The civilian ship dissolved like sugar in rain. Wait, said Tay suddenly. What about the new species? The ones from the dark sector? You mean the humans? Asked Heian. But they're primitives. They only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago. Exactly, Tay replied excitedly. They're so new that there's no data on their military capabilities in the galactic databases. They might have something we don't know about. Yuna considered this. The humans were indeed a mystery. They had appeared on the galactic scene recently with crude but effective FTL drives. Their ships were ugly things made of metal and composite, materials instead of grown crystal or bioformed polymers. The few diplomatic contacts had described them as aggressive and territorial. Most civilized species avoided their region of space. What do we know about their home system? Yuna asked. Tay consulted his science station. Their primary world is classified as a Class 12 death world. Extreme gravity, high radiation, unstable weather patterns, and massive tectonic activity. The fact that intelligent life evolved there at all is considered remarkable by xenobiologists. Ezao, death world, whispered Borum. No wonder they're so aggressive. Death worlds were rare in the galaxy. Most intelligent species evolved on garden worlds with stable climates and gentle conditions. Only a few had developed on planets hostile to life itself. Those species were usually dangerous in ways that peaceful civilizations couldn't understand. Captain, said Heian urgently, 3 more Vorthak bioships are approaching our position. We have maybe 10 minutes before they're in weapons range. Yuna made her decision. Tay, prepare an emergency beacon. Include our situation data and all intelligence we have on the Vorthak. Set the destination for the human home system. Captain, that's over 200 light years away, protested Tay. Even if they wanted to help by the time they got here, by the time they get here, we'll all be dead. Yuna finished. But maybe they can learn from our fate. Maybe they can prepare for what's coming. She paused, then added, send a simple message with the beacon. Ancient enemy returns. Billions will die. Send whatever aid you can spare. Tay worked quickly at his station. The emergency beacon was a simple device designed to carry basic information across interstellar distances at maximum speed. It would reach human space in days rather than the weeks it would take a ship. Beacon, prepared and ready. For launch, Captain. Launch it, Yuna ordered. The beacon shot away from the Harmony's light like a silver dart. It accelerated rapidly and disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with it the desperate hope of a dying civilization. Yuna watched it go and wondered if the humans would even understand the message. Their language was so different from Kalari that translation was often difficult. Captain, the Vorthak ships are closing, reported Borum. They're charging their main biocannons. Yuna stood up from her command chair and faced the main viewer. The enemy ships were closing in like sharks sensing blood in the water. She thought about her homeworld below and all the people who were already lost. She thought about the beacon racing through hyperspace toward a species they barely knew. All hands, this is the captain, she said, activating the ship-wide communication system. We have done our duty. We have sent word to those who might avenge us. Now we make our stand. The first biocannon blast struck the Harmony's light and tore through its crystal hull like it was made of paper. Yuna was thrown to the deck as systems exploded around her. The lights failed, and emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red. She could hear the hull groaning as the ship began to break apart. Captain called Heyoon through the smoke and sparks. The beacon cleared the system. It's away. Yuna smiled as she felt the ship dying around her. Whatever happened now, the message would reach the humans. She only hoped they would understand what it meant. Admiral Minho stood in the communications center of Terran Defense Command and stared at the alien message that had arrived 3 hours ago. The translation software had worked overtime to make sense of the Kalari language, but the meaning was clear enough. Someone was dying and they were asking for help. The Admiral was an old man by human standards. 60 years of military service had left him scarred and gray, but his mind was still sharp. He had fought in the colony wars, the AI rebellion, and countless smaller conflicts that most civilians never heard about. He knew what desperation looked like, and the alien message reeked of it. "Run the translation again," he told Lieutenant Sora, who was working at the main console. "Ancient enemy returns. Billions will die. Send whatever aid you can spare," she read in her clear voice. "That's the core message, Admiral. The rest is technical data about their attackers." Minho nodded and turned to study the holographic display that showed what the Kalari had learned about their enemies. The creatures they called Vorthak looked like something from humanity's worst nightmares. Biomechanical ships the size of asteroids, weapons that dissolved matter at the molecular level, a hunger that could strip entire worlds bare of life. "Analysis," he said to the team of experts gathered around the display. Commander Jiwon stepped forward. She was the head of the Xenological Division and humanity's leading expert on alien species. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, but her eyes were bright with intelligence. "The Kalari are a peaceful species, Admiral. Garden world evolution, low-gravity, stable climate. Their technology is impressive but focused on harmony rather than warfare. According to our files, they've never been involved in a military conflict, and now they're fighting for their lives," Minho observed. "Not fighting," corrected Colonel Yejun from the Strategic Analysis Department. "Dying. Look at their ship designs." He gestured to the hologram showing elegant crystal vessels. Beautiful, but completely unsuited for combat. These Vorthak things are cutting through them like they're made of glass. Minho studied the tactical data. The numbers were grim. The Kalari had started with hundreds of ships and thousands of defensive platforms. Within days, they were down to scattered survivors sending desperate messages into the void. "How far is their system from our space?" 237 light-years, answered Captain Dongyun from navigation. "About 3 weeks' travel. Time for our fastest ships. By then it'll be over," said Jiwon quietly. "The Kalari will be extinct." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed that fact. Humanity had been alone in the galaxy for so long that finding other intelligent species had been like discovering they had distant cousins. The Kalari had been among the first to make contact. They were traders and explorers who offered friendship and knowledge in exchange for human raw materials and manufactured goods. "What do we know about these Vorthak?" asked Minho. Colonel Yejun pulled up another display. "Ancient species, possibly millions of years old. They seem to emerge from dark space every few thousand years, consume everything in their path, then disappear again. The galactic databases have references going back 50,000 years, but always incomplete. Everyone who encounters them dies. Except someone survived long enough to write those records," pointed out Jiwon. "Scattered survivors, maybe," replied Yejun. "But never enough to mount effective resistance. The pattern is always the same. They appear, they feed, they vanish. Like a plague that sweeps across the galaxy in cycles." Minho walked to the large viewport that looked out over New Seoul, the capital city of humanity's first colony world. The city stretched for hundreds of kilometers in all directions. Millions of people going about their daily lives unaware that somewhere in the galaxy, an ancient horror was devouring entire civilizations. "Admiral," said a new voice from the communication station. "Priority message from Earth. President Do-hyun wants to speak with you directly." Minho nodded and walked to the secure communication booth. The president's face appeared on the screen, looking tired but determined. Do-hyun had been in office for 6 years and had guided humanity through some of its darkest hours. The AI rebellion had nearly destroyed human civilization before they found ways to fight back. Admiral, I've seen the alien distress call, said the president without preamble. What's your assessment? Genocide in progress, sir, replied Minho bluntly. An entire species being wiped out by something that makes our worst enemies look like children playing with toys. Can we help them? Minho paused before answering. Not in time to save them, sir. But we might be able to learn something. Maybe. Prepare for when these things come for us. When not if, asked Do-Yun. The pattern suggests they'll keep expanding, sir. They've consumed dozens of species over the millennia. Eventually, they'll reach human space. The president was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, I want you to prepare a response fleet. Not just for reconnaissance. Full military deployment. Sir, with respect, a few ships won't make any difference. The Kalari had hundreds of vessels and— Who said anything about a few ships? Interrupted Do-Hyun. Deploy the 3rd, 7th, and 9th fleets full strength. Minho felt his jaw drop. Sir, that's nearly 40% of our total naval capacity, 1,500 ships and 500,000 personnel. Then we'd better make sure it's enough, said the president firmly. Admiral, we don't abandon people who ask for our help. Even if we're too late to save them, we can make sure their deaths mean something. The connection ended, leaving Minho staring at a blank screen. He had served under 3 presidents, and Do-Yun was by far the most decisive, also possibly the most insane. Deploying nearly half the human fleet to help aliens they barely knew was either brilliantly strategic or completely reckless. He returned to the main operations center where his staff was waiting. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our orders. Full fleet deployment to Kalari space. I want the 3rd, 7th, and 9th fleets ready to depart within 72 hours. The room exploded in activity as officers rushed to implement the massive undertaking. Moving 1,500 warships and their support vessels was like relocating a small nation. Fuel, ammunition, food, medical supplies, replacement parts. Millions of tons of material would need to be loaded and thousands of personnel transfers completed. Admiral called Commander Jiwon. What should I tell the other alien species? The Alteran hegemony has been asking about increased human military activity. They're getting nervous. Tell them we're conducting large-scale training exercises, replied Minho. No need to panic the neighbors until we know what we're dealing with. Captain Dong-Hyun approached with a data pad. Admiral, fleet composition for your approval. The 3rd Fleet under Admiral Yoonji will take point. Heavy cruisers and battleships with full fighter escorts. The 7th Fleet under Admiral Kyung-soo will provide support and logistics. The 9th Fleet under Admiral Hyuna will handle reconnaissance and fast attack. Minho reviewed the list. 1,500 ships ranging from massive dreadnoughts to nimble destroyers. Each vessel was armed with the most advanced weapons humanity could build. Railguns that fired projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Fusion missiles with yields measured in gigatons. Plasma cannons that could melt through armor like it was butter. What about the new experimental weapons? Asked Colonel Yejun. Deploy them, said Minho without hesitation. If we're going up against something that's been consuming galaxies for millions of years, we'll need every advantage we can get. The experimental weapons were humanity's latest attempts to push the boundaries of destructive capability. Antimatter, warheads that could crack planets, gravity bombs that created artificial singularities, nano-disassemblers that could reduce enemy ships to their component atoms. Most were still in testing phases, but desperate times called for desperate measures. Admiral, said Lieutenant Sora from the communications station. Message from the shipyards. The new dreadnought Righteous Fury is requesting permission to join the fleet. Captain Sunwoo says his ship is ready for combat despite still being in trials. The Righteous Fury was the newest and most powerful warship in human service. 5 kilometers long and armed with weapons that could sterilize continents. It had been designed specifically to fight enemies that conventional tactics couldn't handle. Approved, said Minho. We'll need all the firepower we can get. Over the next 3 days, the greatest military mobilization in human history took place. Ships arrived from across human space. The Mars Defense Fleet sent their newest carriers. The Centauri Command contributed their experimental stealth destroyers. Even the remote frontier worlds sent what they could spare. The media tried to cover the massive movement of ships, but military censors kept them focused on the training exercise. Story. Only a few high-ranking officials knew the real reason for the deployment. Humanity was going to war against an enemy they had never faced to defend people they barely knew. On the morning of departure, Minho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable Will, and watched as 1,500 human warships formed up in attack formation. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Each ship represented years of human engineering and thousands of hours of training. Together, they formed the most powerful military force in known space. "Admiral, all fleets report ready for hyperspace jump," announced Captain Jamin from the navigation station. Captain Hana gripped the armrests of her command chair as the silent thunder dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kalari system. Her ship was one of the newest stealth reconnaissance vessels in the human fleet designed to gather intelligence without being detected. What she saw on her tactical displays made her stomach turn. The system was a graveyard. Debris from thousands of ships drifted in slow orbits around the central star. Some pieces were still recognizable as Kalari vessels with their elegant crystal hulls now shattered and dark. Others were twisted metal fragments that could have come from anything. The beautiful architecture that had once marked Kalari space was gone, replaced by the cold silence of extinction. "Passive sensors only," she ordered her crew. "I don't want anything that could give away our position." Lieutenant Jiho worked at the sensor station, his face pale as he processed the incoming data. "Captain, I'm reading massive biosignatures throughout the system. Whatever did this is still here." Hana nodded grimly. The silent thunder had arrived ahead of the main human fleet to scout the situation and gather intelligence. What they found was worse than anyone had expected. "Put it on the main display," she said. The holographic projector showed a three-dimensional map of the system. Red markers indicated the positions of hostile contacts. There were hundreds of them scattered throughout the space between planets, like a pack of predators feeding on a kill. Each marker represented a Vorthak bioship larger than most human cruisers. "Focus on the inner planets," ordered Hana. The display zoomed in to show the worlds that had once been home to billions of Kalari. What Hana saw made her hands clench into fists. The planets were no longer blue and green. Their atmospheres churned, with ugly brown clouds, and their surfaces showed dark scars where entire continents had been stripped bare. It looked like someone had taken beautiful garden worlds and fed them through a meat grinder. "Captain," called Ensign Nuri from the communications station. "I'm picking up faint transmissions from the third planet. Very weak, but definitely artificial." "Survivors?" asked Hana, though she hardly dared to hope. "Maybe. The signals are coming from underground locations. Bunkers or caves, probably." Hana felt a flicker of hope in her chest. If some Kalari had survived, they might be able to provide crucial intelligence about the enemy. "Can you clean up?" "The transmission's enough to get a translation." Nuri worked at her station for several minutes before shaking her head. "Sorry, Captain. Too much interference from the atmospheric disturbances, but the pattern suggests they're distress calls." "Keep monitoring," Hana ordered, then turned back to the main display. "Show me these bioships. I want detailed scans." What appeared on the screen looked like something from humanity's darkest nightmares. The Vorthak ships were living things made of metal and flesh fused together in ways that hurt to look at. They moved through space with the fluid grace of predators, their hulls pulsing with veins of dark energy. Weapon ports dotted their surfaces, like hungry mouths, and sensor arrays twisted and writhed like tentacles tasting the void. "Analysis," she said to her science officer, Lieutenant Commander Wu Jin. "They're definitely organic, Captain," he replied, studying his readings, "but heavily augmented with technology. I'm reading power signatures that are off the scale. These things could probably take on an entire human battle group single-handed." "How many are we looking at?" Wu Jin consulted his instruments. "Conservative estimate puts the number at over 800 active bioships. There might be more in the outer system that we can't detect yet. 800 ships, each one more powerful than anything humanity had ever built." Hana did quick math in her head. The human task force was bringing 1,500 ships, but if these readings were accurate, they would still be outnumbered in terms of actual firepower. "What are they doing?" she asked. The answer came from the navigation officer, Lieutenant Hyunwoo. "Captain, they're not just sitting idle. Look at these movement patterns." The display showed the bioships moving in coordinated groups between the planets. As Hana watched, she began to see a pattern. They were herding something, moving in vast sweeps across the surfaces of the worlds below, driving whatever survived toward collection points. "They're farming," she whispered in horror. "They're not just killing the Kalari, they're harvesting them." Wu Jin nodded grimly. "The biosignatures suggest massive processing facilities on the surface of each planet. They're taking every living thing and converting it into nutrients for their ships." Hana had seen war before. She had fought in the AI rebellion where machines tried to exterminate their creators. She had witnessed the colony wars where humans fought humans over resources and territory. But this was something different. This was consumption on a galactic scale. The complete erasure of an entire civilization, not for conquest or resources, but simply to feed an endless hunger. "Captain," called Nuri urgently. "New contacts dropping out of hyperspace, multiple large signatures." Hana's heart skipped a beat. If the Vorthak had reinforcements arriving, the human fleet would be walking into a trap. "Show me." The tactical display updated to show new arrivals at the edge of the system. But these weren't bioships. The signatures were clean and mechanical, with the familiar energy patterns of human vessels. "It's the advanced squadron from the 3rd Fleet," announced Hyunwoo with relief. "Admiral Yoonji's task group." Hana watched as 12 human dreadnoughts and their escorts took position at the hyperspace limit. Even at this distance, she could see their weapon systems charging and their fighter squadrons launching. The human ships looked crude compared to the elegant Kalari vessels that littered the system, but they were designed for one purpose. "War. Captain, incoming transmission from the flagship," said Nuri. "Put it through." Admiral Unji's face appeared on the communication screen. She was a hard woman in her 50s with scars on her face from fighting boarding actions during the AI rebellion. Her eyes were like chips of ice as she took in the tactical situation. "Report, Captain." "System is crawling with hostiles, Admiral," replied Hana. "Over 800 bioships confirmed, with possibly more hiding in the outer reaches. The planets have been stripped bare, but we're detecting some survivor transmissions from underground locations." "Survivors?" asked Unji. "How many, unknown, Admiral? Signals are too weak to get accurate numbers. Could be thousands or just a few dozen hiding in bunkers." The Admiral's expression hardened. "Any survivors are too many to abandon." "What's the enemy doing?" "Feeding," said Hana simply. "They've set up processing centers on all inhabited worlds. They're converting every living thing into biological resources." "How long do we have before the main fleet arrives?" Hana checked her chronometer. 6 hours, Admiral." Unji nodded. "We hold position until then. I want continuous surveillance on those bioships. The moment they move toward us, I want to know about it." As if summoned by her words, the enemy began to react. The nearest bioships started changing course, moving toward the human ships with predatory intent. Their hulls pulsed with increased energy as weapon systems came online. They moved like sharks, sensing blood in the water. "Admiral," called Hana. "Enemy ships are moving to intercept. Looks like they've detected our presence." "All ships battle stations," ordered Unji. "Launch all fighters and charge main batteries. If they want to fight, we'll give them one." The space around the human task group exploded into activity. Fighter squadrons streamed from carrier bays while the massive dreadnoughts brought their main guns to bear. Point defense systems came online and shield generators hummed with power. In minutes, a small portion of space transformed from emptiness into a fortress ready for war. The first Vorthak bioships reached engagement range and opened fire with weapons that defied human understanding. Beams of corrosive energy lanced out, followed by projectiles that seemed to be made of living metal. The human ships responded with railgun salvos and fusion missiles that lit up the darkness like new stars. "Multiple hits on enemy lead ship," reported the tactical officer aboard the flagship. "No visible damage." That was bad news. Human weapons were designed to destroy anything they hit, but the bioships seemed to shrug off attacks that should have vaporized them. Worse, the enemy weapons were having an effect on human armor. Where the corrosive beams struck hull plating began to dissolve and twist into unnatural shapes. "Admiral," called another voice from the flagship. "We're getting reports from the surface, monitoring stations. The bioships planetside are reacting to our presence. They're accelerating their harvesting operations." Hana felt sick. The enemy was speeding up their consumption of the survivors because they knew help had arrived. Every minute they delayed meant more Kalari would die in the processing centers, but attacking now with just 12 ships would be suicide. "Admiral, the main fleet is still 5 hours out," she reported. "If we wait much longer, there won't be anyone left to save." Yunji's face was stone as she considered the options. Around her task group, more bioships were arriving, drawn by the sounds of battle like scavengers to a feast. Soon the humans would be completely surrounded by enemies that outnumbered and outgunned them. "All ships prepare for combat acceleration," she finally ordered. "We're going in." "Admiral, that's suicide," protested her flag captain. "We'll be overwhelmed in minutes." "Maybe," replied Yunji coldly. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Will and watched 1,500 human warships drop out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Around him, his bridge crew worked with the calm efficiency of veterans who had faced impossible odds before and lived to tell about it. The tactical displays showed a system full of enemies, but that didn't bother him. Humans had always done their best work when outnumbered. "Report," he ordered, as the fleet settled into combat positions. "Advance squadron is heavily engaged with enemy forces near the third planet," announced Captain Jemin from the tactical station. "Admiral Yunji reports moderate casualties, but they're holding position. Enemy numbers confirmed at over 900 bioships, with more arriving from the outer system. 900 ships against 1,500. The odds were almost even until you factored in the size difference. Each Vorthak bioship was larger and more heavily armed than most human vessels. In raw firepower, the enemy probably had a significant advantage. Minho had faced worse odds before, but not by much. "What about the survivors on the planet's surface?" he asked. Commander Jiwan looked up from her station. "Signal analysis suggests several thousand Kalari hiding in underground facilities. The enemy is accelerating their harvesting operations. Best estimate is we have maybe 6 hours before the processing centers eliminate all remaining life signs." 6 hours to break through 900 bioships and establish a safe evacuation zone. It was barely possible if everything went perfectly. In Minho's experience, nothing ever went perfectly in combat. "Fleet positions," he demanded. The main display showed the deployment of human forces. The Third Fleet under Admiral Yunji was already in contact with the enemy near the inhabited worlds. The Seventh Fleet under Admiral Kyungsu had formed a support line ready to exploit any breakthrough. The Ninth Fleet under Admiral Huna was moving to flank the enemy formation and cut off their retreat routes. Admiral called Lieutenant Sora from communications. "Priority message from Captain Hana on the Silent Thunder. She reports the enemy bioships are adapting to our weapons. They're evolving defenses in real time." That was troubling news. Human A. Military doctrine relied on overwhelming firepower applied with precision and speed. If the enemy could adapt to their weapons, the advantage would shift quickly. "Put me through to all fleet commanders," he ordered. The communication system connected him to every ship captain and squadron leader in the task force. 1,500 commanders waited for his orders, while around them the largest battle in human history was about to begin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have confirmation that the enemy can adapt to our conventional weapons. This means we need to end this fight quickly before they have time to adjust. All ships implement Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was the human military's response to adaptive enemies. Instead of relying on a few types of weapons, each ship would use every system in its arsenal. Railguns, plasma cannons, fusion missiles, antimatter warheads, gravity bombs, and exotic weapons that most civilizations had never imagined. The idea was to overwhelm the enemy's ability to adapt by hitting them with too many different attacks at once. Admiral called the weapons officer. "All ships report ready. Experimental systems are armed and standing by." Minho nodded. The experimental weapons were humanity's newest attempts to push the boundaries of destruction. Weapons so dangerous that they had been banned from testing near inhabited systems. If there was ever a time to use them, this was it. "All ships commence. Attack run. Show them why humans don't go extinct." The human fleet surged forward like a wave of metal and fire. 1,500 ships accelerated toward an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. At the center of the formation, the massive dreadnoughts looked like floating cities bristling with weapons. Around them, cruisers and destroyers moved in perfect coordination, while fighter squadrons filled the space between capital ships. The Vorthak bioships responded to the human advance with their own charge. The ancient vessels moved like living predators, their hulls pulsing with dark energy, and weapon ports opening like hungry mouths. They had faced thousands of species over the eons and consumed them all. To them, humans were just another meal waiting to be processed. The two fleets met in the space between worlds with a violence that lit up the electromagnetic spectrum. Railgun rounds traveling at significant fractions of light speed slammed into bioship hulls, while corrosive energy beams carved through human armor. Fusion missiles detonated with the force of small suns, while living projectiles burrowed into ship hulls and began consuming them from within. Multiple hits on enemy formation, reported the tactical officer. Some bioships showing damage, but they're adapting quickly. Recommend switching to secondary weapon systems. All ships implement rotating fire patterns, ordered Minho. Don't give them time to adjust to any one weapon type. The human ships began cycling through their arsenals with mechanical precision. One moment they would be firing plasma cannons, the next switching to particle beams, then to exotic matter projectors. The constant variation kept the enemy off balance as their biological systems struggled to adapt to the rapidly changing threats. Commander Siok's destroyer squadron demonstrated the human philosophy of warfare perfectly. His 12 ships moved through the enemy formation like a pack of wolves, each vessel armed, not just to fight, but to kill with maximum efficiency. When their railguns proved less effective against adapted bioarmor, they switched to antimatter torpedoes. When those were countered, they deployed nano-disassembler clouds that ate through enemy hulls one atom at a time. Admiral called Jiwan from her analysis station. I'm detecting some interesting patterns in enemy behavior. They seem to be having trouble adapting to our psychological warfare tactics. Humans had learned long ago that the mind was often a more important battlefield than physical space. Their ships broadcast electromagnetic noise designed to interfere with enemy communications. They used holographic projectors to create false targets and sensor ghosts. Most importantly, they fought with a level of tactical unpredictability that confused enemies used to more orderly opponents. The Vorthak had evolved to fight species that responded to overwhelming force with retreat or surrender. They were not prepared for enemies who became more dangerous when cornered. As the human fleet carved deeper into their formation, the bioships began showing signs of confusion. Their coordination faltered, and their formation integrity started to break down. Third Fleet reports breakthrough, announced the communications officer. Admiral Yunji's task group has reached the third planet and is establishing orbital fire support for surface operations. On the main display, Minho could see human ships moving into position above the Kalari homeworld. Their weapons were already targeting the enemy processing centers that dotted the planet's surface. Each facility looked like a massive organism feeding on the remains of civilization. Captain Sunwoo's cruiser Righteous Fury led the planetary assault. The ship was one of the newest in the human fleet, designed specifically to fight enemies that conventional tactics couldn't handle. Its main armament included weapons that most species considered war crimes. Sunwoo had no such qualms about their use against an enemy that processed living beings for food. All ships prepare for surface bombardment, came Sunwoo's voice over the tactical network. Target all processing facilities. We're going to sterilize this entire planet if that's what it takes to stop these creatures. The bombardment that followed was unlike anything seen in galactic history. Human ships rained destruction on the air, planet surface with weapons designed to eliminate every trace of enemy presence. Fusion warheads created new craters where processing centers had stood. Plasma bombardment turned sand to glass across entire continents. Orbital kinetic strikes hit with the force of asteroid impacts. Admiral, we're getting reports from the surface, called Lieutenant Sora. Marine assault teams have located survivor bunkers. They're beginning evacuation operations. The human ground forces were another demonstration of Deathworld evolution. While most galactic species had soldiers that were barely more effective than armed civilians, human Marines were killing machines trained from birth to fight in any environment. They moved through the devastated Kalari cities like ghosts, eliminating any bioform they encountered with weapons that could punch through tank armor. Survivor count asked Minho. Current estimate is around 12,000 Kalari in various underground shelters, reported Jiwon. Most are in poor condition but alive. The Marines are establishing secure perimeters around each bunker complex. 12,000 survivors from a population that had once numbered in the billions. It was a tragedy beyond comprehension, but at least it was something. Those survivors would carry on the memory of their species and hopefully warn others about the Vorthak threat. Admiral called the tactical officer urgently. Enemy ships are beginning a general retreat toward the outer system. They're abandoning the planet. Minho studied the tactical display. The bioships were indeed pulling back, but their movement pattern was wrong for a retreat. They were forming up into larger groups and their energy signatures were increasing. That's not a retreat, he realized. They're regrouping for a final assault. The Vorthak had finally understood what they were facing. 3 months after the battle in Kalari space, Admiral Minho stood before the assembled delegates of the Galactic Assembly on Centauri Station. The massive chamber could hold representatives from over 200 species, but today it was unusually quiet. News of what the humans had done to the Vorthak had spread throughout known space, and everyone wanted to hear the story directly from those who had witnessed it. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering built by dozens of different species as a neutral meeting place for galactic diplomacy. Graceful spires of Altaran crystal spiraled upward alongside flowing organic curves of Zephyrian bioarchitecture. At the center of it all sat the great assembly hall, where the future of galactic civilization was debated and decided. Minho walked to the speaking platform with measured steps. His dress uniform was simple compared to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by many alien delegates, but it carried the weight of authority earned through combat. Behind him stood a small group of human officers who had participated in the campaign against the ancient enemy. The first speaker was not human but Kalari. Ina was one of the 12,000 survivors rescued from the underground bunkers on her home world. She was young by Kalari standards, barely 60 years old, but her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen the end of everything she knew and loved. Her translator worked to convert her musical language into words the assembly could understand. Honored delegates, she began in a voice that carried clearly through the vast chamber. I stand before you as a representative of a dead civilization. My people once numbered in the billions across 17 worlds. Today fewer than 15,000 remain alive. We called for aid expecting perhaps medical supplies or refugee ships. Instead, these humans brought death itself as our ally. She paused and looked directly at Admiral Minho. They arrived when our enemies thought victory was assured. The Vorthak had consumed our fleets, processed our worlds, and were preparing to harvest the last survivors. In 3 days of battle, the humans did what we could not do in 3 weeks of desperate fighting. They destroyed an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. The chamber remained silent as delegates absorbed the implications of her words. The Vorthak had been more than just another hostile species. They represented an existential threat to all organic life in the galaxy. The fact that they had been eliminated by humanity's fleet was causing fundamental changes in how other species viewed the young Deathworld civilization. Ina stepped back, and Admiral Minho took her place. At the speaking platform, he activated the universal translator and addressed the assembly in his calm military voice. Delegates of the Galactic Assembly, I am Admiral Minho of the Terran Defense Forces. I am here to provide an official account of recent military operations in Kalari space, and to deliver a message from the government of humanity. He gestured to the holographic display that appeared above the platform, showing images from the battle. 3 months ago, we received a distress call from the Kalari Federation. The message was simple. Ancient enemy returns. Billions will die. Send whatever aid you can spare. We responded with 1,500 warships and 500,000 personnel. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as delegates discussed the numbers in their native languages. 1,500 ships was larger than the combined fleets of most galactic powers. The idea that humanity had deployed such force in response to a simple plea for help was difficult for many species to comprehend. The enemy we encountered was unlike anything in our military databases, continued Minho. The Vorthak were an ancient species that had evolved beyond simple conquest. They consumed entire biospheres, converting all organic matter into resources for their biomechanical ships. They had done this for millions of years across thousands of star systems. The display showed images of Vorthak bioships in all their terrible glory. Many delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they saw the writhing masses of metal and flesh that had once ruled vast portions of the galaxy through fear and hunger. Our analysis indicated that the Vorthak viewed all organic life as either food or potential food, Minho explained. They had no interest in negotiation, surrender, or coexistence. Their only goal was consumption. This made them incompatible with the continued existence of galactic civilization. He activated another section of the display showing the systematic destruction of Vorthak forces. Human military doctrine when facing an existential threat is simple. We remove the threat permanently. Over the course of 3 months, our fleets hunted down every Vorthak bioship, every processing station, and every spawning ground we could locate. The species is now extinct. The word extinct hung in the air like a physical presence. Many of the assembled delegates had never heard of an entire species being deliberately eliminated. Wars between galactic civilizations usually ended in negotiated settlements or partial occupation. The idea of pursuing an enemy to complete annihilation was foreign to most peaceful species. Ambassador Kira of the Altaran hegemony rose from her crystalline throne to address the assembly. Her species were among the oldest in the galaxy, and their opinion carried significant weight in diplomatic circles. Admiral Minho, while we appreciate humanity's assistance in eliminating the Vorthak threat many delegates are concerned about, the implications of your actions, the systematic extermination of an entire species, even a hostile one, sets a disturbing precedent. Minho nodded respectfully to the Altaran ambassador. With respect, Ambassador Kira, there was no alternative. The Vorthak were not a civilization in any sense that we understand. They were a galactic plague that consumed everything in their path. Leaving even a single bioship alive would have meant the eventual return of the threat. But surely some form of containment or negotiation could have been attempted, pressed Ambassador Kira. Negotiation was impossible, replied Minho firmly. The Vorthak had no language in the conventional sense. They communicated through biological and electromagnetic signals that expressed only hunger and territoriality. They viewed every other form of life as food to be processed. There was no common ground for peaceful coexistence. Commander Jiwan stepped forward from the group of human officers. As humanity's leading xenological expert, her analysis carried weight with the scientific community represented in the assembly. Delegates I have spent months studying captured Vorthak biotechnology and biological samples. What we discovered confirms Admiral Minho's assessment. The Vorthak had evolved beyond individual consciousness into a collective organism driven by a single imperative: consume and expand. They were less a civilization than a galactic cancer. She activated a detailed biological display showing the internal structure of Vorthak organisms. Their bioships were not crewed by individual beings, but were themselves the beings. Each vessel was a single massive organism that had been augmented with mechanical components over millions of years. They reproduced by consuming other organic matter and processing it into new bioships. Left unchecked, they would have eventually consumed every living thing in the galaxy. The implications of this revelation caused another stir among the delegates. If the Vorthak were indeed a form of galactic cancer, rather than a traditional hostile species, then their elimination could be seen as necessary surgery rather than genocide. President Do-Yun's image appeared on the communication screen as he addressed the assembly from Earth. Honored delegates, I want to make humanity's position clear. We did not seek conflict with the Vorthak. We responded to a plea for help from our friends and trading partners, the Kalari. What we found was not a war, but an extermination in progress. We did what any responsible species should do when faced with such a threat. We eliminated it. He paused to let his words sink in before continuing. However, I want to emphasize that humanity has no interest in becoming the galaxy's policeman. We are not seeking to impose our will on other species or to expand our territory through conquest. But understand this clearly. Touch our friends threaten innocent life or attempt to consume entire civilizations, and you will discover why our homeworld is classified as a Class 12 death world. The president's message was unmistakable. Humanity was offering protection to peaceful species, but warning potential aggressors that such protection came with terrible consequences for those who threatened the innocent. It was a new paradigm in galactic relations that many delegates were struggling to understand. Ambassador Yeon of the Crystalline Confederacy rose to speak. Her species had been among the first to establish diplomatic relations with humanity and had observed their development with interest. Admiral Minho, many of our scientists have studied the reports from your military campaign. The level of firepower deployed by human forces exceeded anything previously recorded in galactic history. How do we know that humanity itself does not represent a threat to peaceful civilizations? Minho had expected this question and had prepared his answer carefully. Ambassador Yeon, humanity has had the capability to exterminate other species for decades. We developed interstellar travel 50 years ago and could have begun a campaign of conquest at any time. Instead, we established trade relations, offered assistance to struggling colonies, and responded to calls for help. Our actions speak louder than our capabilities.